Ethan Graves stepped out of his car and into the crisp evening air, the neon glow of Graves' Steakhouse flickering against the pavement. A place he had built from the ground up. A place that once prided itself on exceptional service, a warm atmosphere, and a sense of home. Now, standing before it as just another customer, a stranger to his own empire, he felt the first twinge of unease gnaw at him. The rumors had reached him, whispers of declining service, of customers leaving with dissatisfaction etched into their faces. It was time to see the truth for himself. He straightened his simple jacket, making sure he looked nothing like the polished businessman his employees were used to seeing. No suit, no watch, no telltale signs of wealth. Just an average diner walking in for a meal. The heavy glass door swung open, the scent of charred steak and garlic butter filling his senses. A familiar comfort, but the warmth ended there. The hostess at the front barely spared him a glance. A young woman with an air of disinterest, fingers tapping against the podium. She didn't smile. Didn't ask how many were in his party. Instead, she flicked her gaze over him, then back to her phone, muttering, "Just one." Ethan nodded. A test, but also a warning sign. He had trained his staff to welcome guests as if they were old friends returning home. This was the first crack in that foundation. She grabbed a menu without enthusiasm and gestured lazily toward a small, dimly lit table near the kitchen doors. The worst seat in the house. He followed, feeling the vibrations of a loud conversation behind the counter. Two employees, one male, one female, leaned against the counter, laughing. Another solo diner. Bet he's gonna sit there for an hour and leave, what, a $2 tip. Megan, he recognized the voice. One of his longer-standing servers. Sharp-witted but prone to gossip. The man beside her, Jake, a newer hire. Younger, brash. Ethan had seen his file once. Good experience, decent customer reviews. But now, he was grinning, muttering something Ethan couldn't quite catch before both of them erupted into laughter. Sliding into his chair, he let out a slow breath. So this was what had become of his staff. Minutes passed before anyone acknowledged him. A different waiter finally appeared, approaching with a kind of detached politeness that suggested he had no real interest in the exchange. Ethan glanced at the name tag. Jake. Of course. Jake barely made eye contact as he pulled out a notepad. Yeah, what do you want to drink? No greeting. No warmth. Just a transactional exchange. Ethan kept his voice neutral. Water's fine. Jake let out a barely concealed sigh, scribbling it down. Food. Flipping through the menu, one he had designed himself, each dish crafted with thought, he chose a classic. Ribeye. Medium rare. Jake smirked. Hope you like it bloody. Ethan raised an eyebrow, but Jake had already turned, making his way back to the counter, not bothering to repeat the order for confirmation. The two cashiers were still chatting, still laughing, and as he watched, he caught the moment Jake leaned in and muttered something. The words were too quiet, but the laughter that followed was unmistakable. They were talking about him. He had expected some level of neglect, maybe indifference. But this was something worse. The kind of casual mockery that spread like rot through an establishment, turning what was once a well-oiled machine into something that barely functioned. It wasn't just about him. It was about every customer who walked through these doors, unknowingly stepping into a place where they were seen as nothing more than nuisances. Time stretched. His drink arrived late and was placed on the table without a word. When his steak finally came, it wasn't medium rare. It was overcooked, nearly well done, and the edges had dried out. Ethan cut into it, watching as the dull, gray center confirmed what he already knew. He looked up. Jake had already disappeared back to the counter, where Megan was waiting. She glanced at Ethan, smirked, and said something under her breath that made Jake chuckle. The simmering frustration in Ethan's chest deepened into something heavier. He waved Jake over. "Excuse me." Jake's footsteps were slow, reluctant, and when he reached the table, his expression was irritated. "Yeah. This isn't medium rare." Ethan held up a piece of the steak, his voice steady. "It's overcooked." Jake barely looked at it. "That's medium rare, man." Ethan met his gaze, silent, letting the weight of it settle. Jake scoffed. "All right, well, if you want, I can take it back, but it's gonna be a while." "No need," Ethan replied, setting the knife down. "I'll manage." Jake shrugged. "Suit yourself." As he turned away, Ethan heard Megan snicker. "Oh my God," he actually complained. "You were right, total cheapskate." Ethan's jaw tightened. It wasn't about the steak. It was about what this place had become. He ate slowly, forcing himself to take in everything. The lackluster energy, the gossip, the half-hearted service. The old couple at the next table struggling to get anyone's attention. The way the employees huddled together, too wrapped up in their conversations to care about the diners. When he finished, he left a tip on the table. $2. Not because he was stingy, but because he wanted to see what would happen next. The moment he stepped away, Jake swooped in to collect the bill. Ethan lingered near the exit, just within earshot. Jake let out a sharp laugh. "Called it. Dude left $2. Megan snorted. "Bet he's one of those guys who lives off coupons and still complains about prices." The cook in the back chimed in, "Probably lives alone with 6 cats." The group erupted into laughter. Ethan stood there for a second longer, letting the moment carve itself into his memory. The names. The voices. The faces. Then, without a word, he pushed open the door and walked out. He had seen enough. Ethan hadn't said a word to them that night. Hadn't called out their behavior, hadn't asked for the manager, hadn't made a scene. It would have been easy to. A few sharp words, a reminder of who he was, and they would have scrambled to fix their mistakes. But that wouldn't have solved anything. Fear lasted only as long as the threat was present. Real change had to be earned. That night, as he sat alone in his office, watching security footage from previous weeks, it became clear this wasn't a one-time issue. It was a pattern. The same employees loitering, whispering, laughing at customers behind their backs. The same cold, dismissive service. The same lack of urgency, as if the place wasn't a business but a personal lounge for the staff. How long had this been going on? How many customers had left his restaurant, feeling what he had felt, like they didn't belong in a place meant to welcome them? He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. Tomorrow, they would see him not as a nameless diner, but as the man they had mocked. The next evening, Graves' Steakhouse opened as usual, the golden glow of the chandeliers casting a warm light over the dark wood interiors. Employees filtered in, greeting one another in that casual, almost lazy way Ethan had come to recognize. Jake arrived late, 3 minutes past his shift time, but no one called him out. Megan leaned against the host podium, flipping through her phone. The manager, Claire, stood behind the counter, speaking quietly with the bartender, oblivious to everything else. None of them noticed when the front door swung open. The energy shifted the moment Ethan walked in. This time, he wasn't the quiet, unassuming customer from the night before. He wasn't wearing the worn-out jacket, the muted clothes meant to blend into the background. Tonight, he was Ethan Graves, the owner. His tailored navy blue suit, crisp white shirt, and the subtle but unmistakable shine of his watch made sure there was no mistaking it. Claire's head snapped up first. Her eyes widened, and she straightened so quickly it was almost comical. The sound of chairs shifting, the clatter of silverware, the entire floor seemed to react at once. "Mr. Graves." Claire rushed forward, forcing a polite smile. "What a surprise. We weren't expecting you tonight." Ethan met her gaze, unreadable. Clearly. Behind her, Megan had frozen, her phone forgotten in her hands. Jake, who had been mid-sip of a soda near the kitchen doors, nearly choked. The color drained from his face as their eyes met. Ethan let the silence stretch. Let them feel it. "I had dinner here last night," he said finally. Claire blinked. "Sir, I sat at that table." He motioned toward the dimly lit corner near the kitchen doors. "The worst seat in the house. I was given overcooked food. Dismissed when I mentioned it. Mocked the moment I walked out. The air in the room seemed to thin. I heard every word," Ethan continued, his voice even. "Every joke, every sneer. About me. About other customers. His gaze flicked toward Jake, who couldn't meet his eyes. Would you like to repeat what you said? Jake's throat bobbed. Sir, I didn't mean. Cheap old man. Ethan's voice was quiet, but sharp as a blade. That's what you said, didn't you? Jake's mouth opened, then closed. Megan took a small step back, her fingers tightening around the edge of the podium. Claire, to her credit, had paled but quickly straightened, forcing authority into her voice. I'll handle this, Mr. Graves. I had no idea. No, Ethan cut in, his tone controlled but firm. You should have known. You were here. This isn't an isolated incident, Claire. This is the culture you allowed to fester. Her face fell. The restaurant was silent. Other employees, even those uninvolved, had stilled, watching, listening. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Ethan exhaled slowly, letting his words settle before speaking again. This restaurant, my restaurant, was built on a foundation of respect. For the customers, for the staff, for the craft of what we do. What I witnessed last night was a betrayal of that. His gaze swept the room. So tell me, how many people have we lost? How many customers have walked out of these doors, not because of the food, but because of the way they were treated? No one answered. Because they knew. Because even those who hadn't directly participated had seen it happen. Had let it happen. I'm implementing changes, Ethan continued, his voice unwavering. Effective immediately. The restaurant held its breath. From this point forward, customer service training is mandatory. There will be no exceptions. If you work here, you will treat every guest as if they were me, sitting in that chair last night. His eyes flickered toward Jake and Megan. Or you won't work here at all. Megan visibly flinched. Jake nodded quickly, looking more like a cornered animal than the smug server from the night before. Why yes, sir. Understood. But Ethan wasn't finished. There will also be secret inspections. I'll be bringing in outside evaluators, people you won't recognize. If I hear so much as one more complaint about rudeness, disrespect, or employees treating this place like their personal hangout, the consequences will be swift. Claire finally spoke up. I'll make sure the team understands, sir. This isn't acceptable. I should have done more. Yes, Ethan said simply. You should have. She looked down, ashamed. Megan, who had spent the past 5 minutes staring at the floor, finally lifted her gaze. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I'm sorry, Mr. Graves. Ethan studied her, then Jake. Both of them had lost their arrogance, their careless confidence. Now, they just looked like people who knew they had made a mistake. I don't need your apologies, Ethan said. I need your actions. Megan nodded quickly. Jake swallowed hard. Claire straightened, her expression set. The other employees, some guilty, some simply affected by the weight of the moment, stood in uneasy silence. Ethan glanced around the restaurant. We'll be reopening for dinner in an hour. That gives you all exactly 60 minutes to decide if you want to be part of the solution or walk out that door. He took a step back, adjusting his cuff. Choose wisely. With that, he turned and walked away. The room remained still for a long time. The doors to Graves' Steakhouse opened precisely 1 hour later. The staff, still reeling from Ethan's words, scrambled to reset the dining floor. The usual ease with which they lounged at the host's stand or bantered near the bar had disappeared. Instead, there was a tension in the air, an awareness that everything had changed. Megan smoothed her apron for the 3rd time, hands trembling slightly. She hadn't left. She had considered it, had even stared at the back exit for a full minute before realizing that walking away now would brand her a coward. Jake had stayed too, though he was quieter than usual, avoiding everyone's eyes. Even Claire, normally poised, moved with a sharpness that hadn't been there before. They had 60 minutes to prove they belonged here. Or they would be gone. The first wave of customers entered, unaware of the undercurrent of unease threading through the restaurant. Megan forced a smile as she greeted a couple at the door. Her voice was too soft, uncertain. She cleared her throat, trying again. More warmth. More sincerity. "This way, please," she said, leading them to their table. At the bar, Jake's fingers hesitated on the register as he punched in an order. His usual nonchalance was gone. Instead of sliding drinks onto the counter without a word, he made eye contact, forced a polite, "Here you go, enjoy." It felt unnatural, rehearsed, but he was trying. Ethan watched it all unfold from his usual place near the back. He had taken the same corner table where he had been humiliated just the night before, but this time he wasn't hiding. The staff knew he was there, and that knowledge alone was enough to change everything. The night stretched on, a test in real time. Some employees adapted quickly, adjusting their attitudes as though a switch had been flipped. Others faltered, struggling to break old habits. Megan caught herself once, almost making a snide remark about a patron's outfit before biting her tongue so hard it hurt. Jake tripped over his words when a customer asked for extra ice in their drink. His instinct was to roll his eyes, scoff, say something sarcastic. Instead, he swallowed it. By the time the dinner rush peaked, it was clear who had learned their lesson and who hadn't. Near the kitchen, Claire overheard a whispered comment, one of the newer waiters muttering under his breath about a difficult table. She turned so fast the air around her seemed to shift. "That's your last warning," she said quietly, voice sharp as a blade. "If I catch you disrespecting a guest again, I'll fire you myself." The waiter's face drained of color. He nodded stiffly before hurrying away. Claire exhaled. A week ago, she might have let it slide. Now, she knew better. By closing time, the exhaustion in the restaurant was palpable. The staff wasn't just tired from the usual demands of a busy shift, they were drained from the effort of unlearning bad habits. Ethan stood, the legs of his chair scraping softly against the floor. Every pair of eyes flickered toward him, waiting. He took his time walking to the center of the restaurant, stopping just beside the bar. His gaze swept across the room, measuring, judging. "You all had a choice tonight," he said, voice calm but firm. "To prove you deserved a place here. Some of you stepped up. Some of you didn't." The weight of his words settled over them like a heavy fog. "Megan," Ethan continued, turning to her, "do you remember what you said when I walked in last night?" She visibly winced. I do, sir." "And what about you, Jake?" His gaze shifted. "What was it again? Cheap old man?" Jake closed his eyes for a second, as if the words physically pained him. "Yes, sir," he admitted. Ethan tilted his head, studying them both. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. "And yet," he said slowly, "you stayed. You changed. Why?" Megan swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Because I was wrong." Jake's voice was rough when he spoke. "Because I realized what kind of person I was becoming." Ethan nodded, his expression unreadable. "You both have a long way to go," he said. "But tonight, you proved you're capable of doing better. You can keep your jobs." The relief on their faces was immediate, but neither celebrated. They both knew this wasn't a reward, it was a chance. Ethan turned to Claire next. "You were supposed to be leading," he said, quieter now. "Instead, you let this happen under your watch." Claire tensed, looking away. "I know. Are you willing to fix it?" She exhaled. Then, without hesitation, "Yes." Ethan studied her a moment longer, then nodded. "Then do it." A subtle shift, almost imperceptible. But it was there. The understanding that mistakes had been made. That they had nearly lost something valuable. That they had taken their positions for granted. Ethan turned toward the rest of the staff. "There will be no second chances after tonight," he said. "This restaurant survives because of its reputation. We offer good food, but people don't come back just for that. They come back for the experience." He let the words sink in. "And if you aren't willing to provide that experience, you don't belong here." Silence. Then, a nod from a busboy in the back. A quiet, "Yes, sir." Another nod. Then another. Until finally, the weight of the night settled into something new. Something that felt like purpose. Ethan glanced at his watch. Go home. We open again tomorrow. The shift was over. One by one, employees filtered out. Some walked a little faster, as if eager to escape the night's reckoning. Others lingered, exchanging hushed conversations, absorbing the change that had swept through the restaurant like a storm. Megan was the last to leave. She paused at the door, looking back once at the dimly lit dining floor. Ethan caught her gaze. "You're lucky I came in last night," he said, his tone unreadable. She gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. "Yeah, I know." Then she was gone. Ethan stood in the empty restaurant, letting the quiet settle. It wasn't just about firing bad employees or scaring them into behaving. That wasn't leadership. It was about creating something worth being proud of. And tonight, he had started rebuilding.